Good evening, Dean. Good evening, classmates. Our group will report on the welfare of the workers during pandemic. The members of our group are Attorneys Romero Pacilan, Rejoice Subejano, Cornelio Domantay, Hijara Stephanie Lucman, and yours truly, Sanawia Adap-Maongco.
Ang bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ng ginto't bulaklak.
The early containment measure to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 required that businesses temporarily stop their operations and encourage workers, especially in non-essential industries, to work from home. As lockdown was implemented, many businesses closed and consequently were constrained to lay off workers. The top 5 industries which registered the largest drop in employment from January to February were the following: administrative and support service activities, accommodation and food service activities, construction, mining and quarrying, and electricity, gas, steam, and air conditioning supply. The Philippine Statistics Authority's LFS, or the Labor Force Survey, showed that some 9.1 million Filipinos experienced being laid off temporarily or permanently from March 2020, the start of pandemic, to February 2021. Losing job at the time of pandemic is a life-threatening. Just this May 6, 2021, however, according to the country's economic managers, the rising of labor force participation and falling unemployment have enabled millions of Filipinos to regain their jobs and incomes in March 2021. As reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority, the unemployment rate significantly declined from 8.8% to 7.1% in March 2021. This is the lowest reported rate since the height of the enhanced community quarantine last April 2020. The underemployment rate also decreased from 18.2% to 16.2%, reflecting the improvement in the quality of jobs. In addition, more people rejoined the labor force as the labor force participation rate improved. However, due to the continuous surge of COVID cases, which as of May 10, 2021, has reached more than 1.1 million, with more than 18,000 deaths, economic recovery is beyond reach. And then we have our health workers contracting virus. COVID-19 infection among health workers in the Philippines have reached its highest tally in the last 6 months. That's according to the data from the Department of Health. The total number of COVID cases among health workers totaled a number of more than 16,500. The total number of COVID deaths among health workers as of April 13, 2021 is 86. And then we have our overseas Filipino workers. A report of the Department of Labor and Employment's International Labor Affairs Bureau showed that there are more than 600,000 of OFWs affected by the pandemic. As of April 4, 2021, the government has repatriated more than 500,000 overseas Filipino workers who were displaced by the COVID-19 pandemic and have been safely transported back to their home provinces after undergoing COVID-19 tests and quarantine protocols in various hotels. Records also indicated increasing number of OFWs infected with the disease. As of April 4, 2021, it recorded 17,495 confirmed COVID cases among OFWs based on reports submitted by 40 Philippine overseas labor offices worldwide. Of the total, 10,155 recovered and 938 died.
Pilipinas kung minumutya, ugat ng luha at dalita.
With the struggles and sacrifices of our workers, what are the government's response to protect the workers? The answer will be discussed by Attorney Stephanie Lucman. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Hijara Stephanie Lucman. Part 2 of our report will be on the government responses to the pandemic. So first things first, let's go to the Office of the President. On March 16, 2020, the Palace issued memorandum ordering work-at-home arrangement, both in the public and private sectors, with the ECQ in place in the entire Luzon. Only those private establishments providing basic necessities and activities related to food and medicine production shall remain open and should adopt a strict skeletal workforce to support operations as well as strict social distancing measures. How about the DOLE? These are the Department of Labor and Employment COVID-19 mitigating measures. On March 4, 2020, they issued Labor Advisory Number 9, Series of 2020. This is the guidelines on the implementation of flexible work arrangements as remedial measure due to the ongoing outbreak. On March 17, 2020, pursuant to the Public Health Declaration, Department Order Number 209, or the COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, or simply what we call CAMP. This is a one-time financial assistance of 5,000 for workers who are greatly affected with the ECQ. On March 18, 2020, another department order was issued pursuant to the Declaration of Public Health Emergency. It's the TUPAD BKBK, or Barangay Ko, Bahay Ko, Disinfecting and Sanitation Project. The qualified beneficiaries are the underemployed, self-employed workers, and displaced, marginalized workers who have lost their livelihood or whose earnings were affected due to the ECQ. On April 9, 2020, DO number 212 was released, or the guidelines on the provision of financial assistance for displaced land-based and sea-based OFWs. This covers both documented and qualified undocumented OFWs who have experienced job displacement. They will receive 10,000 one-time financial assistance. Then on May 18, 2020, Labor Advisory Number 18 was released, or the guidelines on the cost of COVID-19 prevention and control measures. Here, it shall be the employer who will shoulder these costs. They cannot be directly or indirectly charged to the workers. On October 26, 2020, Department Order 215-20 was issued, extending from 6 months to 1 year the allowable period that employers can place their staff on floating status during the health crisis. Then on November 5, 2020, and pursuant to Bayanihan 2 law, there is a joint Memorandum Circular 2020 between Department of Tourism and Department of Labor and Employment. It's cash for work and one-time cash assistance for employees of tourism businesses who lost jobs and income due to the government restrictions brought about by the pandemic. This year, on March 9, 2021, Advisory Number 21-01 was issued. It is the continued vigilance against new COVID-19 variants through reinforcement of existing minimum public health and safety standards and protocols. So it was a mere reiteration of previous issuances of DOLE. On April 23, 2021, another press release wherein the secretary said more contract tracers can now be hired by LGUs in the NCR through their public employment service offices, or what we call as PESO, to help curb the spread of COVID-19 with additional 65 million pesos earmarked by the Labor Secretary. On April 28, 2021, pursuant to Administrative Order Number 30 by the President, DOLE announced ECC Board Resolution Number 21-04-14, which includes COVID-19 as one of the compensable work-related diseases. It's a cash assistance to frontline workers who suffered from the COVID-19 disease by reason of their employment. Then lately, on April 30, 2021, another press release where there is symbolic vaccination for OFWs and daily wage earners. It stated that 3,000 OFWs and 2,000 minimum wage earners will be vaccinated. On the same day, another press release on Labor Day online job fair, wherein more than 26,000 local and overseas job opportunities are being offered starting May 1, 2021. How about the Civil Service Commission? As early as May 7, 2020, CSC Resolution Number 20000540 was issued. It's the guidelines for alternative work arrangements and support mechanisms for workers during the pandemic. It provides for the different flexible work arrangements in government agencies. Later, in November 17, 2020, another resolution or the guidelines on absences of government officials and employees during the community quarantine due to the pandemic was released. Absences from work of government employees due to the imposition of community quarantine in light of the pandemic may be treated as excused absence or vacation or sick leave. So we go now to Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, or OWA. So as early as February 3, 2020, the DOLE issued a memorandum to OWA where the Labor Secretary directed the OWA to provide 10,000 pesos cash assistance, accommodation, and transportation to each stranded OFW caught up by the travel ban to China, Hong Kong, Macau, and other declared affected areas. Then, a month after, March 11, 2020, the Cash Aid and Transport Service was immediately provided to quarantined seafarers cleared from COVID-19. In the same month, March 17, they launched the Hatid Sundo sa Stranded OFWs. It's a free transport service to OFWs heading to and from the NAIA. On the same month, again, March 26, 2020, the mobilization of FAST, or the Food, Airport, Shelter, and Transportation Assistance to OFWs from Kuwait. It's OWA's holistic approach in providing assistance to repatriated and stranded OFWs due to COVID. It includes provision of food, airport assistance, temporary shelter, and transportation assistance. Then on August 28, 2020, they launched Project EASE, or Educational Assistance through Scholarship in Emergencies. These are educational assistance offered to qualified children of its member OFWs affected by the pandemic. Then lately, on May 1, 2020, the virtual Labor Day celebration, dubbed as Talakayan para sa Manggagawang Kabayan, organized by the Philippine Overseas Labor Office in Germany. Basically, OWA assured assistance to OFWs who continued to be adversely affected by the pandemic. So the next reporter will be discussing on the impact of these responses on the workers.
Good evening, classmates. My name is Cornelio Domantay Jr., and I'll be reporting about government response and its impact in this time of COVID pandemic. For the first slide, we will tackle about dole cash assistance as a government response. Dole cash assistance involves subsidy and giving other monetary consideration to employees who were retrenched or who lost their employment, provided they are Filipino, either working here in the Philippines or abroad as a returning OFW. The dole cash assistance has produced an effect that has reached 1,059,387 workers and had disbursed about 4.44 billion in the regular budget of the Department of Labor and a separate 1.05 billion in emergency fund. Although this amount of money may be big, the workers who had received the dole cash assistance said that it is still insufficient for their subsistence, considering that it does not amount to a 1 month pay of their salary. Usually it is just a subsidy or a form of food or grocery that they can use in order to live. The second slide would be the multiple work arrangement as a government response. Under the multiple work arrangement, these are work from home and compressed work week, alternative work such as 30 or 50%, 20% only of the workforce of a certain company or organization. This was given by the Civil Service Commission in terms of government, and in terms of the private sector, the Labor Department. But this multiple work arrangement has given it hard conditions such as support mechanism, health and psychosocial intervention, provision of personal protective equipment to employees, and reasonable transportation facilities and housing quarters was made available. What made this multiple work arrangement difficult to the employees, both in the private and the government sector, is that the employees were not accustomed to such. They were, for the longest period of their employment life, they were accustomed to the normal 9 to 5 p.m. work schedule a day. So this made it very difficult for the employees to cope with it. And the usual complaint of employees is that they have to wear masks for the whole duration while inside the facilities or while inside their offices. Lack of ventilation and wearing of personal protective equipment, as well as lack of social interaction with their co-employees has given rise to a certain depressive mode among the employees of an organization. That is why there is a need for health and psychosocial intervention and other means in order for the people to be able to understand the predicament that they are in now. Next slide would be the payment for hazard pay for health workers. This has been a contentious issue because, especially for the medical frontliners, because they wanted the hazard pay to be given on time. Unfortunately, in a palace briefing, Health Undersecretary Leopoldo Vega said that budget constraint was made it impossible for the hazard pay or special risk allowance of medical frontliners to be paid on time. That's why they're asking for the Department of Budget and Management that the hazard for January to June of this year, 2021, should be released now. He also said that they are hoping that they will be given the provision from the DBM so that they can easily download the hazard pay and the special risk allowance, especially to the medical frontline workers. What made this impossible, or what made this situation even more unbearable, is the fact that the country and the government is not yet attuned with the digitalization of commercial transaction. If only there is probably a national ID system or a digitalized mechanism by which this hazard pay may be given to employees, it would have been easier for the government and for the frontline health workers to receive their pay on time. This pandemic has exposed the need for digital transformation, digital banking in all sectors of the society of the Philippines. The next slide would be the floating status of a lot of workers during this time. That's why DOL, under Department Order number 215/2020, that it allowed the extension of the suspension of employment in case of a national emergency such as this pandemic. Under the floating status, a person is still considered an employee. However, during the period that he or she is not working, such person will not receive any compensation. So it is akin to a no work, no pay. But this is in order to help the economy as well as the industries that were greatly affected by the pandemic. When the allowable period is up, the employee can either be retrenched with separation pay or asked to return to work. DOL Undersecretary Benavides said that the department issued the order as the economy is slowly reopening and businesses are resuming operations. So, as a final note, no government, including the Philippine government, was able to weather the effect of the pandemic in a short span of time. All government across the globe found it hard to grapple with the world's slowdown and economic meltdown. The response of the Philippine government in terms of economic stimulus, although responsive and timely, still falls short, precisely because of the overall economic impact of the pandemic. Data on the jobs that were retrenched and other necessary information to aid government response was delayed, proved futile because people who were supposed to give the data were constrained to be in their houses under alternative work arrangement. Furthermore, people who were supposed to give aid and response, especially frontliners like policemen, nurses, doctors, and other individuals in the front line of this pandemic, found themselves infected with COVID-19, thereby making the government constrained to act efficiently. But this scenario is not only common in the Philippines but elsewhere in the world. So this pandemic has really exposed us to the reality that we should be prepared in such eventuality.
Hi, I am Atty. Subejano, and tonight I will be discussing on the legal analysis of our group. I will be discussing primarily on the 1987 Constitution, particularly the provisions that affect the right of workers or employees. We will take once again a tour on these beautiful and promising provisions of our Constitution and how these affect now the present workers in view of the devastating effects brought about by this pandemic. Are these provisions still relevant in the light of the economic havoc that is pervading our country today? Let me show you these constitutional provisions under Section 5 of Article 2 of our 1987 Constitution provides the following: the maintenance of peace and order, the protection of life, liberty and property, and the promotion of the general welfare are essential for the enjoyment by all the people of the blessings of democracy. Section 18. The state affirms labor as a primary social economic force. It shall protect the rights of workers and promote their welfare. Section 3. The state shall afford full protection to labor, local and overseas, organized and unorganized, and promote full employment and equality of employment opportunities of all. It shall guarantee the rights of all workers to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, and peaceful concerted activities, including the right to strike in accordance with law. They shall be entitled to security of tenure, humane conditions of work, and a living wage. They shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes affecting their rights and benefits as may be provided for by law. This is found in Article 13, Section 3 of the 1987 Constitution. Now, to magnify this all, to put a clearer picture on this, I will show you this matrix that will show the condition as well as the right of the workers, civil, political rights, and their welfare rights. Let me show you this matrix. Under this first column, you have here the condition, which is the economic environment. The second column is the civil and political rights. And the third column refers to the welfare rights. Under the first row, we have the pre-pandemic. Of course, when there was yet no pandemic, the right to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, peaceful, concerted activities, including the right to strike, are very important. These are demanded, availed of by all our workers. There was no question with that. And under the column welfare rights, of course, the protection of life, security of tenure, minimum wages and salaries, minimum hours, days of work, all of this are properly observed, demanded by our workers. No doubt about it. But how about during the pandemic? We have here the right to self-organization is even restricted. Collective bargaining negotiation becomes non-essential. It is already immaterial to every workers. You cannot hear them talking about collective bargaining agreements. The right to strike has even restricted because, of course, of the situation. You cannot expect all people to come together and to voice out their concerns and their redress to our government. Under the column of welfare rights of our workers, protection to life is unsecured. We all know that. That is even that is already an admitted fact. Security of tenure is unprotected. We have heard about it. We have seen mass layoff. Wages and salaries is hardly regulated and even checked because workers do not anymore demand minimum salaries as long as they can get wages enough to sustain their families, and that's all right. And then the minimum hours, days of work has not been observed. Workers, even given 3 hours work a day, 4 hours work a day, they will bite it because of the condition in our country. Now, on the last row, you have there the remedies of the state to mitigate the impact of the pandemic to workers. Well, we know that in the ECQ, MECQ areas, the right to strike and to peaceably assemble is, of course, prohibited. And in the GCQ areas, this is tightly regulated. Now, under the welfare rights of the workers, you have there the requirement on the minimum health standard protocols. Of course, social distancing, wearing of masks, face shields, etc. This has been a standard operating procedure in every employment, in every workplace. Extension of floating status, which is up to 1 year, as exhaustively discussed by my companion. The cash assistance, of course, we have heard that provided for by our government, although inadequate, but at least enough to sustain the workers for a certain period of time. The cash for work was granted by the government, and even priority of being recalled to work after the pandemic has been granted by our government as a policy. In the final analysis, the laws protecting the rights of the workers come relevant only under normal conditions. But in situation like this where COVID-19 pandemic wrought havoc to our economy, affecting all sectors, especially the workers, survival eclipses all other rights. What becomes more important to everyone, not only to the state and the employers, but even the workers themselves, is survival. To make themselves and their families stay afloat in these most difficult times. All other rights become subservient to that right to stay alive during this pandemic. In the light of all this, what is our recommendation? This will be delivered to us by Attorney Romero, Pacilan. Thank you and stay tuned.
Good day, Dean Silfrey Candelaria, and to all my classmates. I am Romero Pacilan, and I would like to report on our group's recommendations pertaining to the welfare of our Filipino workers during the pandemic. There are 5 areas of concerns which we would like to address in our recommendations. These areas are protection of the security of tenure. Uh, Second is the promotion of health and welfare. Third is the promotion of political rights, followed by enhanced and equal job opportunities, and lastly, capacity building and skill retooling. I would like to start with the protection of the right to the security of tenure. Our first recommendation is for the government to finance work and wage subsidy schemes to minimize job losses. Second, the government must provide a 10 billion peso bailout fund for ailing domestic companies on condition that the beneficiary company shall not lay off workers and not to use the fund to increase the salary of its officials. According to the Department of Labor and Employment, around 3.8 million local workers and over 550,000 overseas Filipino workers have so far been displaced by the pandemic. The government therefore must set up a short-time work arrangement and to provide subsidies to employers for the hours not worked by the workers. Our economy has sustained an estimated 1.5 trillion pesos in business losses. We believe that the proposed bailout fund will make a huge difference in our road to recovery. The second area of concern that we would like to discuss in our report is the promotion of health and welfare of our workers. In this area, our first proposal is to relax the conditions for the compensability of COVID-19 disease under ECC Board Resolution number 21-04-14. We believe that the conditions outlined in the resolution are so stringent that the affected workers will find it difficult to avail of the benefit. Second, we employ the government for the strict enforcement and monitoring of employers' compliance to the minimum health requirements to ensure that their personnel are not exposed to the risk of infection. And third, we have the government must establish a free and dedicated hotline for work-related concerns regarding strategies to contain the spread of the COVID-19 disease. We know there are online platforms offering medical consultations for a fee. The government, however, must set up a dedicated hotline where free medical consultation for work-related COVID-19 concerns may be addressed. Our fourth recommendation is the grant of wage subsidy for returning OFWs and workers in privately owned businesses affected by the current emergency for a period of at least 3 months. It may be noted that micro, small, and medium enterprises comprise 88.5% of all registered business enterprises in the country, and according to Senator Villanueva, when we aid a struggling MSME, our subsidy cascades down to the workers who will be able to keep their paycheck because we have helped avert a shutdown. And last but not the least, we are looking at free vaccination for workers who wish to be vaccinated. Vaccination is a safety net not only for our frontline health workers, but also for our ordinary workers who have braved the risk of COVID-19 infection in order to eke out a living and continue providing food on the table for their families. Without vaccinating our workforce, the threat of COVID-19 contamination will not be significantly reduced. The third area of concern is the promotion of political rights. Here, we are asking for adequate and safe mechanisms for mobility for purposes of work. It is submitted that workers must be able to go to work unhampered. The strict and rigid implementation of quarantine protocols and restriction in movement has put ordinary workers in a very disadvantaged situation, forcing them to spend more travel time in going to and from work. Secondly, there is also a need to strike a balance between allowing business and social activity to resume while avoiding or containing any new spike in infections. Containing the spread of the virus is both the job of the government and the people. However, the government must understand that the implementation of restrictions to movement of people and business operations may only serve to aggravate the adverse effects of the pandemic. There is more to containing the pandemic than the implementation of strict quarantine protocols. Lastly, we are looking at sufficient social and political spaces for political discourse for the promotion and protection of labor. Our workers must continue to enjoy the free exercise of the right to air their grievance and to freely express their sentiments without fear of reprisal and red tagging. A transparent and free and inclusive political discourse will help us collectively confront the continuing threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The next area of concern is enhanced and equal job opportunities. Here, we are looking at setting up a national and central portal for job seekers. The government must mandate employers to post job vacancies in the central portal and encourage employees to actively monitor the portal for job vacancies that suit their qualifications and skill set. Also, it is important that the central job portal be manned by dedicated personnel who are passionate in helping and guiding job seekers. We are also seeking a definitive non-discriminatory work policy. The government must institutionalize the policy against requiring prior vaccination as a qualification for hiring. While the DOLE has made pronouncements against this requirement for hiring, the DOLE has to make this position concrete by issuing a policy statement and imposing corresponding penalties for non-compliance. Last but not the least is capacity building and skill retooling. In this area of concern, we are proposing two measures. Here, we are asking the government to launch and support a retooling program for OFWs and other workers affected by the pandemic and provide support mechanisms for its sustainability. We are also asking that uh, the displaced workers, including OFWs, be granted startup capital or funds and or income generating assets so that they would be able to uh, withstand the various challenges posed by the pandemic. They have been unduly displaced from their source of livelihood, and it's just uh, proper for the government to attend and address these needs. So that ends our report. Thank you very much. Daghang salamat. Keep safe, everyone.